Final Fantasy Mystic Quest originally released in North America October 1992, but for the internet, despite being made by Japan, wouldn't come out in Japan until September 10th, 1993, and it would also be renamed from Final Fantasy Mystic Quest to Final Fantasy USA Mystic Quest, with the European release also being 1993 in October, being called Mystic Quest Legend. I believe it's also the first actual Final Fantasy title released in Europe, like in general. So there's a reason why the names heavily differ and the release does. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest was released in North America specifically first because it was designed to be a more beginner-friendly entry in a sense, believing that people in North America saw RPGs still as a major niche, which technically they did, but like I said, the idea was essentially take Final Fantasy and then tone it down for this wider audience, if you say, in order for its release. Hence why the Japanese release specifically states it's Final Fantasy USA Mystic Quest, highlighting the region it was designed for, rather than just calling it a Final Fantasy title straight outright. This gives it a huge reputation for being quote-unquote the worst Final Fantasy in general, and I'm gonna say right now, I disagree with that heavily, but let's get to the game itself for its reputation. Our main premise that our main character, who we can't fully name, apparently the default name is Benjamin, is climbing the quote-unquote hill of destiny and meets a mysterious old man who claims that the main character is the knight from the legendary prophecy to save the world. Or might be, because not even they're sure. But either way, our main character is tasked with going throughout the world in order to save the crystals that are in danger of these monsters draining their energy. And as the old man flies away, our main character then looks at the camera, making a comedic gesture, highlighting this game's tone of a way more light-hearted experience. And despite this description being very basic, that's really the main premise of the story, because while stuff happens in the narrative, this is the main point. It's more so about the interactions you have with the characters than actual overall grand narrative, with the game constantly having new characters replace the support role on your party, because the only party on the side is of two. So it's more about the interactions you have with the characters than the actual main story. Despite the support character role constantly changing, I do like the fact that the characters do interact with each other, even when they get replaced, or some characters who were there before end up coming back later, making the entire world feel fully connected with the characters interacting despite the different regions of the world, and then for the support role. On top of them all having their own motivation, not just for the same reason of, oh, trying to fulfill some prophecy, considering, like I said, even the main character, the old man who told about the prophecy, weren't even sure it was actually a thing to begin with. Overall, when it comes to the narrative of Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, I want to say it's just fine, but like I said, I do like the fact that they do make the world feel connected with not only just NPCs around the world, but also the characters that you have with you, and how certain points, like, oh, go back to this town to go to this previous person in your party to help progress the plot, have this person return, have this person who was injured early on come back later, and stuff like that. Like, for a game that structure only has 2 party members, they do a pretty good job of making sure all the characters remain relevant in this narrative, even if it is a more simple narrative, so props to them for doing that. There are other RPGs that struggle to all the characters remain relevant in the story. As for the more comedic tone, it's not hugely comedic, and it is funny enough that they're using the more sprite-based style of Final Fantasy IV, which doesn't really have the characters emote, is why the main emotes that our main character can do is either after using an in, when it's like a pose, or when the old man flies away and he's like going like, ah, come on, or you see this guy kind of gesture. But it's funny enough because this was meant to replace North Americans and I guess also Europeans getting Final Fantasy V. which that game had completely emotive sprites and everything, which ironically would have fit better for its kind of comedic game to have the characters really sell the comedy, but here you just have the more limited animation style Final Fantasy IV, where in that game's sprite-based original version, all the characters could do was just like wave their hand or one time a hug sprite, but that's about it. But this is a spin-off where it was made for the idea that RPGs are more niche for Western audience, so it makes sense they wouldn't have gone all out for it. It's just the fact that the ironic potential they could have had if they used some of the more Final Fantasy V advancements. Now for the main gameplay, with Final Fantasy Mystic Quest being a turn-based RPG, but it does not use the active time battle system of Final Fantasy IV, going for a more regular RPG style with the speed stat dictates the turn order what's going on. You input the moves, and the characters roll out. In combat, you have the attack ability using whatever equipped weapon you have. With the weapons in this game not being stuff you necessarily buy, you actually find them or get them from story characters from mandatory scenes, but it's the fact that weapons upgrade in tiers. So you may have sword, axe, claw weapons, etc., but the better versions will always take precedent over the previous ones. They always get upgraded, can't go back to a previous version and everything. And the main character exclusively can swap between all the weapons they have, giving them more options in combat, since some moves are AoE by nature, and some can also apply status effect from the weapon type. So there are options for even just basic attacks, with the partner character only having the one melee attack that they will have the entire time, and you cannot swap them. You do also have magic, which in this game uses more of a magic spell charge system of Final Fantasy I, where they're separated into white magic, black magic, and wizard magic, each one having their own spell charge amounts, with you only be able to cast that category of spell a certain amount of time, but it goes higher and higher the higher you level up. So let's say you have 30 white magic points, go to cast 30 white magic spells until you recover it, and stuff like that. There's also not a huge amount of spells. You get fire, congrats, that fire spell is the best fire spell you got. It will be that way the entire game. Kinda sense. So it's not like any sort of Final Fantasy staple of, oh, Cure, Cura, Curaga. No, Cure will be Cure the entire game. It'll just be better as you level up and everything. How you get spells is from finding it throughout the world. Despite the fact that this game has a very linear world map, you only go to certain areas the game lets you. There's no free roaming in the world map. But every dungeon generally has stuff to find, including optional armor, optional weapons, and optional spells. So despite this game trying to be more linear in the sense of no big map, it is also exploration based in the sense of there's stuff to find in the dungeons to get. So this game does get a back and forth criticism of exploration, where there's no exploration overworld, but there is exploration when it comes to the dungeons themselves. Speaking of the dungeons, this is where the game's biggest changes are evident. Going for a more action-esque kind of thing, the main character has certain action abilities in dungeons. They can jump, and each weapon they have can be used to help progress certain aspects of the dungeon, making the big focal point feels like being the dungeons themselves because they have so much going on. It also means that previous dungeons, having pathways you couldn't get to, you can now actually get to as well. So there's a reason to actually backtrack to certain dungeons as well in this game. I just find it funny how the dungeons being more interesting to go through is something Final Fantasy fans, at least mainline fans, probably would have enjoyed, since by this point in the franchise, they're pretty much a bit more straightforward, and now here's this spin-off that's meant to be the more simple, linear kind of game, having a more interesting dungeon and everything. Also the fact that in this game, when you get defeated in battle, you're able to restart the battle immediately. You don't get booted back to the main menu like in other Final Fantasy games, so it is more forgiving in that sense, on top of the fact that there are no save points. You can save anywhere in the game. No matter where you are, you can always save the game on your 3 save files, showing how much more lenient this game is And also funny enough how it feels like these features that are meant to be more simplified and linear and beginner friendly are ironically features that people nowadays tend to want and appreciate from RPGs. So it's one of those funny in hindsight things that some of the stuff Mystic Quest does in order to tone things down are now also things you see people constantly clamor for. Despite this game being very linear, there is also a good amount of backtracking in this game, especially towards the finale, where it's to keep backtracking to certain locales. But there are no random encounters in this game. Every encounter is something that was always placed there, whether it be a monster you see on a dungeon, or one dungeon whose gimmick is it that you can't see the monsters, so it gives the illusion of random encounters, but in reality is an item you can find to reveal the monster locations, and stuff like that. And instead of battles in the overworld, you have these battlefield little areas that always have 10 bells to them. If you fully complete the battlefield, then you'll gain a bonus, whether it be bonus money, bonus items, or bonus equipment, so they are worth doing, even if it gets exhausting that every single battlefield placement on the overworld is specifically 10 battles, never any less. One gripe I do have in this game are stats elements. Specifically the fact that, in my experience, I only had one weapon type that could still stats elements, the claw weapon, but enemies always had stats element spells. It annoys me because of the fact that stats elements are basically the most powerful thing in this game, and enemies exclusively had them. They don't need to defeat you, and they can just turn your party to stone, put them to sleep, or make them paralyzed so they can't fight back for the entire battle. Hell, how about insta-death? Stuff like that made the enemies at later parts of the game get very annoying when they can just do that the entire time. There are also enemies that can also heal themselves, making fighting them more annoying because the turn order can just decide that one person attacks, enemy's almost dead, someone heals them, the other partner attacks, enemy's almost dead, someone heals them, basically all progress has been undone. You can use magic to help, but using AoE versions of magic makes them less powerful, and it drastically reduces the damage of AoE abilities to a point where I started to feel like it wasn't even worth investing in using AoE version of a spell, because the massive reduction in damage is ridiculous, unless it's a cure spell being made AoE, in which case, always use that. It still heals a lot of HP for both characters, but it's just one of those weird things that they wanted to use the magic, but it feels like they just wanted to use the magic one at a time because of the damage reduction. You were trying to hit an entire enemy party at once. Overall, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is fine. Like, it's funny how some of the stuff in here that was made to simplify the game is stuff that some people unironically would want nowadays, but it's not anything super offensive. People treat it as baby's first RPG or whatever. It's like, no, or they think you're that stupid, or no, not really, it's fine. Some of the features are interesting, and I know I compare to Final Fantasy IV's visuals and everything with the sprite work, but I do know the more appropriate comparison would be to Final Fantasy Legends 3 or Saga 3, being, I believe, having similar developers as well, especially when it comes to the composer of both games and everything. There's almost days where this game is fun. At worst, there's one dungeon that may overstay its welcome. You can't figure out the gimmick to it, what's going on, but it's not the main thing. The main focus feels like it's on the dungeons, with how much more goes into them compared to the combat of the game. Yes, the story is designed to be very basic and simple, but with its emphasis on character interaction, everything, and all the characters coming together, feeling like one big entire friend group, once again, kind of thing that people nowadays do enjoy from an RPG, having the characters interact with each other, even if the party member size is only up to 2 members, everything. So, once again, what are those things that some people would actually appreciate, and some people do appreciate that kind of stuff more than the actual main overall plot of an RPG. Mystic Quest was just made to appeal to a younger demographic. Mental history repeats itself considering it's still trying that for 2016. But it's just one of those things that I just don't see how it got the huge negative reputation it got. Like, so people saying it's the worst Final Fantasy title, like, really? I understand it's simplified, but y'all enjoy other simplified Final Fantasy 15. So I don't know, I just don't get the massive hate this game got and everything, especially when some of the stuff it does. Ironically, people would enjoy some of its more stuff, like restarting battle immediately, or being able to save anywhere, or the characters always feel like a big connected group of characters, rather than just people who feel connected to the main character and not to anything else, kind of thing. So what can I say about Final Fantasy Mystic Quest? Just a fine game, has its merits, has its downsides, but overall, you can see the main goal was just trying to appeal to a wider audience. Did it work? No. In fact, the game only got released on Super Nintendo and the Wii Virtual Console. Nowhere else. Oh, but they tried. Anything else I gotta say about it? Alrighty then, good day.